Hello, and welcome to episode 13 of the In the Clutch podcast. My name is Drew Clutchy, and I'm here alongside my co-host, Jeremy Wilson.
Yeah, I just had a quick Trivial Pursuit story I wanted to share.
What? I want to share the Trivial Pursuit story. So last night, I was playing Trivial Pursuit with a few of my friends, and there's a category in Trivial Pursuit which is like competitions. So it could be sports, it could be video games, any kind of thing like that. And now we're counting it amongst my friends and I like it's the sports category because that's the one that we all have a chance of getting, and therefore we're all going to try to land on the orange tiles to get a sports question. So I'm going through and I'm trying to land on the orange tiles to get my first like wedge of the pie, and I'm getting all the video game questions. I know nothing about video games, and then my friends are landed on the orange tiles, and it's like, who scored 4 shootout goals in the 2014 Olympics? And it's TJ Oshie, right? Or like, what is like MLR stand for? And in the context, it was Major League Rugby, and I got it right in my head. I was like, oh, I know that. I'm getting all the video game questions. Cannot get a sports question. So I'm like struggling through this game of Trivial Pursuit. And like this game took hours because none of us are particularly good at Trivial Pursuit. It's really hard. So I'm working through the game, and I finally get a sports question where the answer is LeBron James. And nice. I know it. And I'm like, oh yeah, like it's LeBron James. It wasn't even a real sports question. It was, what movie was he in? Or like, who was the co-star to this person? And it was LeBron James from the movie Trainwreck.
Right.
So it was like I happened to see the movie, but it still wasn't even really a sports question. It's just the answer was LeBron James. So anyway, so I got that, and I was one of the first people to get a question right worth like a piece of the pie. So I was actually winning for a little bit. And then I just went ice cold on every other category and every other type of question. And that was pretty much it for me. But after 3 hours, it gets better. After 3 hours, we're still going. And nobody's particularly close to winning because Trivial Pursuit's really hard. So we decide we're going to take one card, and we're going to read all 5 questions to everybody, like one from each category. And everybody will just write down their answer to each question, kind of like a Final Jeopardy thing.
Mm.
And then whoever gets the most right wins out of those 5 questions. And if 2 people tie for getting the most right, then whoever has the most pieces of the pie currently like on their tile in the board game will win. Mm-hmm. So we come down to that, and we're going through, and one of the questions was about March Madness.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about March Madness either. And it was March Madness like 2014. And it was, what team won both the men's and women's tournament? Would you care to offer a guess, Jer? By the way, Jer's still here. I know I'm going on a monologue, but I'm looking at him. He's here.
In which year? Is there a year specified?
2014. You can't Google it, though.
No. Women's tournament seems like UConn, but I don't remember the men when UConn team winning a March Madness tournament, but I'm going to go with UConn all the same.
You're right. It was UConn. But I didn't put UConn because I wasn't thinking, and I just went with Villanova. Because I was thinking, and I thought, I bet Villanova got one around 2014 for the men, and then I just didn't think UConn wins every year.
What year did Dante DiVincenzo win a title for UConn? Or not UConn, Villanova.
Villanova. I'm not sure. That would be, are you going to pull it up, or do you want me to?
I can.
But yeah, so anyway, that's my Trivial Pursuit story. Is the only 2 sports questions that I got. One of them was not a sports question, really, and the other one I got wrong.
It's pretty embarrassing.
To make a long story short, I'm not very good at Trivial Pursuit. But there you go.
It looks like 2018 is when DiVincenzo went off in the national championship game.
Yeah, he's old. Or he's young, I mean.
Also, credit to you for continuing with your story. I was totally trying to get you to not get through the intro and restart the recording. But good for you for continuing on.
I knew that something like that was going to happen. So, you got to adapt and overcome, right? Improvise, adapt, and overcome.
Speaking of March Madness, I just want to come out and criticize everybody and anybody who doesn't cheer for upsets if they don't have a perfect bracket. Like, if your bracket is perfect, cheer for your bracket to be perfect. I respect that. If your bracket is not perfect and you are not cheering for a 16 seed to upset a 1 seed, unless you go to that school, I am not okay with that in any way.
Yeah, upsets are definitely what makes March Madness interesting. Because if March Madness, just by the nature of one and done games, right? If March Madness was like the NBA, where the one seed just wins every time, the
Mm.
viewership on it would go down by so much. Because so much of it is students, and if you're a student at the school of the 16 seed, then you just wouldn't watch.
Right. And like, yeah, so when I'm watching there's a close game between a 15 and a 2 or a 16 and a 1, I would never cheer for the one seed. Like, I know I picked the one seed, but why would I cheer for the one seed? That's no fun.
Yeah, exactly.
Um,
Who wants the best team to win?
yeah, exactly. I can't remember. I had something else to say about March Madness. Uh, so yeah, 15 seed St. Peter's knocked off Kentucky. That was fun. Also, the NBA just knows that the viewership, because it's like kind of close to the end of the season, but not really close enough to be super interesting, that the viewership is going to be down for March Madness.
Right.
So day one of March Madness, the only NBA game played was Pistons Magic.
Yeah, and you know what? I had two people for fantasy basketball for that, and I was the only person in the whole league, I think, because it was Pistons Magic, so it's not like there's a lot of fantasy basketball players in those two teams. So I was like one of the only people in the whole league that had like players available.
Although I do think in that game, Sadiq Bey dropped 51.
Fantasy points or basketball points?
No, basketball points.
I
And
bet that's a career high.
I just don't really know very much about Sadiq Bey for him to drop 51 on the Magic.
Yeah, it's on the Magic though. It's the same thing with Kyrie's 60 on the Magic.
It's still 60.
Yeah, but it's still the
Sadiq
Magic.
Bey is averaging 16. He just dropped 51.
Yeah, which it's impressive, but it's the Magic.
Yes, but there's still NBA players who are trying to defend you.
Okay, but are the Oklahoma City Thunder NBA players that are trying to defend you?
Well, it depends. Is it Lou Dort defending you? Because then, yes.
Well, yeah. Depends on the lineup they put out any given night. But going back to March Madness, I think it's the same as what makes OUAs so interesting. So, Jer and I right now are at rival schools. I'm a Lakehead University Thunderwolf, and Jer is a Wilfrid Laurier Golden Hawk. And for men's basketball, both of our schools are in, I guess it's the final eight. Yeah, the final eight teams. So in the Western Division, there's 4 teams left. It's Laurier, Lakehead, Brock, and McMaster. And then on the Eastern side, it's Carleton and U Ottawa. And then I don't even know the other 2 teams that won, but they're going to get smoked by Carleton and U Ottawa. So it's the same thing for me. What that makes this exciting is one and done games, especially at the level of university and college where everybody's 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, are so exciting because the players, frankly, aren't professionals and make mistakes.
Right.
So to make mistakes in a one and done game, or to have somebody like we had a player in our last game we beat Windsor in the first round of the playoffs, and at the Lakehead game there were over 1,000 fans there, and we had one player, one of our best 3-point shooters, Jared Kreiner, just had a career night, and he dropped 28 points, hitting 7 threes or something. So the game was over before it even got started. Because he just started. It was really like watching Kyrie play the Magic, actually, where he just pulled from anywhere, hit all his shots, and then all of a sudden we were up by 25.
Right. And I mean, I was watching, like you're talking about this with one and done games. I was watching Loyola Chicago, who's a 10 seed against Ohio State yesterday. And Loyola Chicago's best player just had the worst game of his night, like the worst game of his life. Sorry. So he, like, deep in the fourth quarter, he's 1 for 9 from the field and 1 for 8 from the free throw line as a good free throw shooter.
Right.
He just couldn't get anything to go down, and it was a close game, but the whole team just everything rimmed out. And it was just like, so you went cold for one game. You're shooting 30% from the floor, which you haven't done in years. And now you've lost and you're done. Season's over.
Well, and going back to Lakehead, we were in a similar situation to that where Windsor has one really great center, which I think he led the NBA. He didn't lead the NBA in rebounds, but I think he led the OUA in rebounds, and he was really high up in points. He was over 20 points per game. And it was the same thing where it was like playing an NBA game, except one and done, like the play-in tournament, where we didn't have to stop him, but we just had to limit him.
Right.
So we just had to stop him from dropping 30 and 16, right?
Right.
And we did. And then the game was under control the entire time because at halftime, I think he only had like 6 or 8 points. And to be fair, 6 or 8 points where we double teamed him every time he touched the ball.
Right.
So it was actually like an impressive 6 or 8 points, and then I think he went on to have a better second half, but the game was already pretty much over at that point.
Right.
But I think the one and done system that they use both in March Madness, in OUAs, and now in the play-in tournament in the NBA, I think it's an incredible system, which I know the
Yeah.
players don't particularly like it, or rather the players of the better teams, but
Right.
it's just so exciting for the fans.
Yeah. And you were out here trashing the Thunder's defense a minute ago. The Thunder's defense are 0.1 points per game worse than the Bucks defense. They're the 16th
Really?
ranked defense in the league. So,
Really?
yeah.
I'd like to personally apologize to all of the Oklahoma City Thunder fans. So I'm not apologizing to anybody, but uh, nevertheless, I'd like to apologize. I had no idea.
I'd like to personally apologize to that one Kings fan I might have insulted.
Nah, you don't have to apologize to them.
They cheer for the Kings. They deserve it.
Yeah, well, they did it by choice.
Yeah.
That's interesting, though. I had no idea that Oklahoma was that high defensively. I guess it's just an effort thing.
Yeah. I feel like they have solid NBA defenders like Lou Dort or I think Shea's a decent defender.
I was gonna say, trying to name another Thunder player.
Josh Giddey, I feel like, is capable of being a good defender.
Yeah,
Based
well,
on
defense
physical
takes time
ability.
to learn in the NBA at the NBA level, right?
Yeah, and if you're on, again, like obviously effort's not all of it because at some point everybody's gonna be trying.
Right.
But yeah, if you put in good effort on the defensive end, you're not gonna be the worst, defensive team in the league because not everybody does try.
No, exactly. Which I find it interesting at the NBA level that defense is hard to learn because at the high school level, I always thought offense was really hard to learn.
Right. Um, yeah, and I mean it's just a big step up, right? I went from watching um the March Madness playing games directly to watching Raptors Lakers on Wednesday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Tuesday or Wednesday, and it's a whole different game. Like it's so much faster. There's so much more transition. Everybody can dribble instead of you need to get it to your point guard. Anybody who really can bring the ball up the court for the Raptors.
Well, and that's why they don't really press at the NBA level very much, is because all of the guards can dribble out of the press.
Right. Yeah, and I saw they pressed a lot in college, and they were pretty good at breaking the press. But yeah, NBA teams are it's just too easy to break a press, really.
Well, because so your wings can do a combination of dribble or pass out of the press. Your
Right.
centers are tall enough to just see over everybody and pass their way out of the press.
Right.
And then your guards are quick enough to dribble out of the press.
Right. And I mean, if you're thinking about the lineup, the Raptors have been running out with Precious Achiuwa at center, and then Siakam, Van Fleet, Gary Trent, and Scotty Barnes. Like 4 of those players can dribble really well, and Achiuwa can dribble really well for a center.
Right.
So it's like I'm comfortable with at least 3 of those players dribbling through a press. And that's just not true in college. I feel like your center's not really going to be able to break a press, and maybe your point guard can sometimes. And
Yeah, exactly. Maybe sometimes. No, and we know firsthand, even just in practice, like because when you're practicing against your own team, you know what the press is because you've been the people pressing. But
Right.
sometimes even it's hard to dribble out of your own press. Like you
Right.
know where they're trying to force you, and you still get forced to go there, and you get pressed into the corner, and you get stopped in practice, right?
Right.
So if you're really not at that NBA level, it is really hard. Like, and we've experienced that both personally to get out of a press.
Yeah. Okay. Especially if it's a press you've not. Again, NBA players have seen every press. They've played against every press you're going to throw at them.
Right.
Whereas I know did you play? You didn't play in grade 12, did you?
Yeah.
In high school. You did, right. I
The
thought
only
you
year
did.
I missed half of grade 10.
Right.
And then I joined partway through.
So I know in Drew and I's high school experience, we were playing against a team and they would press, but we were finally prepared for their press after they blew us out the first time with it.
Was that
Um,
Ajax?
That was Ajax. So we were only down 2 at half in the playoff game against Ajax. And then they changed their press. And we didn't know they were allowed to do that, and we lost by 20.
I forgot about that. Yeah, shout out to Fort Prairie High School. So when we went to Fort Prairie High School, we graduated in 2019. Fort Prairie High School was AAA, Tier 2 and everything. So we were playing basketball, and Fort Prairie's just north of Oshawa, so there was us, and then there was Uxbridge, which is just north of Markham. So there was us in Uxbridge, but then there's also all the Oshawa schools, or some of them at least, some of the Whitby schools, and then Ajax, and then Dunbarton, which is in Pickering. And we also had Bowmanville, or St. Stephen's, which is in Bowmanville, I think.
St. Stephen's is terrible.
So basically, in Port Perry, which we're in a pretty small town, especially compared to Ajax and Dunbarton and Pickering, we'd play all of the eastern schools like Oshawa and St. Stephen's and Uxbridge, which is northeast of the city. And it'd be like a close game. Some of them we beat, some of them we didn't, kind of thing. Brooklyn we played as well. And then we'd get down into like Ajax Pickering, and we could keep it close for a half. And then, yeah, like Jer said, like they'd change the press on us, and we spent our entire Monday to Friday just working on breaking their one press. We'd be tied at halftime, and then they'd change the press, and that was it.
Yeah, because I know we went to Ajax the first time, and we just got blown off the floor. We were down a little bit after the first quarter, and it was just all downhill from there.
I played that game. I played the most minutes I've ever played. I played 3 full quarters because one of our star players got hurt.
Yeah, went out in the first quarter.
So I was the 8th man on our high school basketball team, and I played 3 quarters at power forward. Which, for those of you who know me, I'm like right now, I'm 6 foot 135. In high school, I was like 5'10", 120.
In that game, they actually had a buyout game against us. So they had 300 people in that gym, and I shot 4 of 14 from the free throw line.
At a Canadian high school basketball game, we walked into Ajax High School, and there were posters with our faces on them, like a photo of the Port Prairie High School basketball team, like on the walls and everything, advertising this buyout. And tip-off was supposed to come around at like 2 o'clock or something, and 2 o'clock hits, and there's nobody in the gym. So we're like, oh, okay, like it's just like a Port Prairie High School buyout, like nobody's actually going to show up. And then the bell rings at like 2:05, and they haven't started the game yet. And then the game starts like 35 minutes late because over the course of like half an hour, 300 people file into the gym after the bell rang at the end of the day.
Yeah, that was an awesome experience. But yeah, again,
I said, that's the only game that I played.
Yeah. Again, we went back in the playoffs. They were playing a 1-2-2 press. We had gone over all week just beating this press. And it was like 25-23 at half. And we were in a good position. And then they ran a 2-2-1 press. And then we got beat by 25. And it was like, oh, well, that's it for us, I guess.
Ajax was really good. And like, so where I was going to go with that, just for one final point, I promise we'll actually talk about the NBA on this podcast. But one final point. So that Port Prairie High School was AAA Tier 2 for everything, which is really high up. So that means if you win an OFSA title, AAA Tier 2, there's only one division better than you, which is AAA Tier 1. So like, we're almost like Pine Ridge. Is it Pine Ridge that normally wins for basketball? Yeah,
Pine Ridge and Jake Lake Richardson run that division.
Right, so they win AAA Tier 1.
Yeah, all the time.
But AAA Tier 2, like Ajax, I think was in the
pretty high up. Yeah.
So like we're almost there. And then the year we're graduating, we're in like our athletics banquet, and we're at the end of grade 12. It's May or June or something, and they announced that we're finally getting demoted to AA. So we went through this grind of 4 years of playing Ajax and Pickering, and it's not just us. Like obviously, all the other sports at Port Prairie High School also have to play all these major schools where we all had a similar bracket where we do pretty well in the southeast and the northeast, and then we get into the Toronto area and we get killed. And they got demoted to AA right when we graduated. I was so mad. So we never won any. Like our basketball team, we never won anything.
But hey, our junior team was way worse than we were, so we can take pride in that.
Yeah. I wonder if they ever got better. I went to a game when I was in first year of university. I went back on reading week and watched the game.
How were they?
I don't remember, but my jersey wasn't in the rafters, so I was pretty upset. I wore 23 because LeBron James wears 23.
Yeah.
I was the 24. LeBron James of our team, the 8th man.
I wore 24 because Norm Powell wears 24.
Do you think they'll make a documentary about me, the 8th man?
Probably.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's tales of the glory days of Jared and I playing AAA Tier 2 basketball in Port Perry, Ontario. But we did
Back
it.
in the 1 year I started. Oh, maybe I started in 2 years in high school.
It started at point guard,
That was fun. I
which
was
Jared played like. So Jared and I have played basketball together. We played for a club in Whitby for. I think I only played for a year because I got a concussion. And then Jared, you went on to play rep. But
yeah.
Jared never played point guard ever. Like, I guess that's not
No,
entirely true, but
I
like,
really did.
Jared and I on this team in Whitby, I was point guard because I liked point guard at the time. And Jared was like shooting guard, small
Small
forward.
forward. I had grown up a small forward. That's where I played.
Exactly. And then he'd only play point guard on that team if I wasn't on the court, but we both played 3.5 quarters a game. So that was like literally a couple minutes
Right.
that I would be on the court. And then, yeah, in grade 12, Coach Tout has this genius moment where he's like, we're going to put Jared point guard. And it just worked.
We
Jared,
didn't have
like,
a backup.
never
I got to
turns
play
the
it
ball
all
over.
the time.
Great point guard. Yeah,
Yeah,
it was an incredible system to just run Jared at the point. And his turnover count was so low, and then we could put shooters around him, and it was a great system.
That was fun. Yeah, we weren't very good, but it was fun. All the same.
The glory days. Okay, so back to the NBA.
Yes. Well,
I love
back
watching
to we
the
never really
Timberwolves
got to
make
it.
fun of Russ, but it's terrible.
Yeah. Patrick Beverly finally gets to get his redemption because, like, again, they've been going kind of back and forth this whole time.
Right.
And Russ as an MVP candidate and Patrick Beverly as a good defensive, maybe starting point guard, has never really been able to win that matchup.
Right.
But now that Russ is a bad defensive, bad offensive, maybe starting point guard, Patrick Beverly has a chance. So
But
I guess good for Patrick Beverly.
there was something that I didn't get, which is, so for people who don't know what we're talking about, Russell Westbrook airballed a 3, and Pat Bev and Karl Anthony Towns spent like a good 9 seconds, like a third of the shot clock, like looking up in the air to see if there's a breeze in the gym that blew the ball off course. And Pat Bev did that thing where he like tried to like get out of the way of the ball as it was coming down. And they spent like a good 9 seconds on it. And while for entertainment purposes, an NBA fan, it was funny. And sometimes you see like, I think it might be Jokic that does it at the free throw line sometimes. Like sometimes you'll see players do the fake dodge to get out of the way of the ball thing. But as a whole, like it was a 9-second thing. The Timberwolves haven't won anything. Karl Anthony Towns has only made the playoffs once in his whole career. So I was like, as much as like Russ is Russ and he's airballing every shot he takes, you do not have the clout to be doing that.
Well, the Timberwolves are 10.5 games up on the Lakers in the standings.
Yeah, but this is
So
a
there's that.
one-off year.
Yes. But
And,
the Timberwolves are good now. I have no issue with them. Can't tell them like the Timberwolves as a team, maybe not. But I feel like Patrick Beverly has the respect to be doing that, and so does Karl Anthony Towns.
No, I don't think you can only make the playoffs once in your career in like 9 years or something, and then have the clout to do that. Because
Well, that's
the
not
other
Karl
thing, too-
Anthony Towns' fault.
But it
Guy's
was like
been doing his best.
But it was like 9 seconds. Like that, you should get that's a second for every year he's been in the league. But what he should have done, Karl Anthony Towns has the clout to do it 1 second for every year he's made the playoffs.
But
So if he just did one little thing and then brought the ball, yeah, that's fine. But it was like they were standing back, like they were having a cup of coffee down there, under their own basket.
hey, they were enjoying themselves.
Which I guess, yeah, the NBA needs some of that sometimes, especially at this time of the year where we're kind of in like the dog. Well, I guess we're kind of out of the dog days of the season now that we're post All-Star break.
Yeah.
But like, it's definitely beneficial to an extent. But I thought like it was just too long, given who it was.
Yeah.
Or if Curry did it, that'd be fine.
I mean, I feel for Westbrook, at least partially. Like, obviously, people are gonna call him Westbrook, and that is what it is. And like, you can't really complain too much about that. You're an NBA player. But I heard him say something along the lines of I don't want to bring my family to games because of what people say about me, and that's a tough place to be.
Well, I didn't understand that because he's like people probably like I don't know. I guess I'm not that serious of a Laker fan, but like people probably don't particularly know who his family is in the stands. But B,
Right.
like it's different to me. Like it's different, obviously, if it's like they're insulting him personally or threatening somebody or whatever. But
Right.
like if we're calling you Westbrick
Yeah,
or something
I would
like that,
assume it's worse than that.
yeah, like I guess we have to. But like the specific thing that he called out was the Westbrook thing, and I was like, that's just a part of being an NBA player. Because it's the
Yeah.
same as. Sorry, go ahead.
Um, yeah, and I think it would have to be something that's worse than that in terms of, and I don't think it's about them knowing who his family is. I think if they're being, um, rude is too casual of a word. Very,
Disrespectful.
yeah,
Like, well,
extremely,
disrespectful beyond an NBA chirp.
right, extremely disrespectful. You wouldn't want your, I don't know how old his kids are, but 8-year-old kid hearing somebody say that about you.
No, absolutely. But it's the same when like this, and this is a really easy player to talk about with regards to this. It's the same with Kyrie Irving. Like Kyrie Irving talks about like, oh, like I just want to go hoop. Like whenever something happens, right? Like there's the whole vaccine thing, and then like all the various political things that Kyrie has been involved with and advocated for and all that kind of stuff. And he talks about like he just wishes he could hoop, right?
Right,
And it's like Kyrie, if you just want to go hoop, you're a millionaire. Go build a court on your in your house and go hoop. But if
right,
you want to hoop in the NBA and get paid millions of dollars to do it, where do you think the millions of dollars comes from? It
right,
comes from all the people who are going to watch it.
right,
And a part of established NBA culture, whether the players like it or not, is to a certain degree, and this is, I guess, not even NBA culture, pro sports culture, to a certain degree, as long as it's in good fun and within the confines of the game, we're allowed to trip the players.
right. And it is part of what it is, right? It's the same as you're not going to stop NBA players from trash talking each other,
Right.
and the fans are just going to be a part of that. Like if you're at a big Raptors game, Drake is going to be there yipping at the other team the entire game.
Yeah.
That's what he does. That's part of coming to Scotiabank Arena and playing the Raptors.
No, exactly. So yeah,
So
that's kind of where I stand on it. Is like, it's not that like if you want to not be chirped, don't play in the NBA. Now it's different if people are being unbelievably disrespectful towards your family or something, or not. Like it's not
right,
within the confines of basketball, but if it's just like they're calling you Westbrook or something like that, or you make a bad play and there's a lot of chirping, that's different to me because that's part of what you sign up. That's why we're paying you.
right, yeah, and I it would only like I have more sympathy if it's going not even just past Westbrook, but like far past that.
Right.
Like they are totally offside comments, which I'm sure there are some made.
Oh,
Um,
I'm sure. Yeah, I can't even imagine what the offside comments are. There's probably a million of them.
yeah, and I know like there was a fan that LeBron had just removed. Like, and I bet like LeBron gets fans yipping at him every single game, but there was a
Right.
game where LeBron just like stopped it and was like looked at the refs and was like, they can't be here anymore because they
Right.
must have said something that was just so totally offside that was like, no,
Absolutely.
I'm done.
And the other thing too is, I I totally support player empowerment. So like whatever that fan did say to LeBron, and LeBron had that fan kicked out, I totally support that. LeBron has the right to feel safe on the basketball court, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So, but I guess that's where I stand. The players have the right to feel safe on the basketball court, but if the players want to be paid to play basketball, there's also a certain level of, like, I guess, I don't want to say disrespect or hate or something, but like, there's a certain level of basketball hate that they have to be willing to accept.
Right. You're gonna have to tolerate that fans. A lot of fans aren't even gonna like you, regardless
Right.
of whether or not they are actively talking trash. Or like LeBron left Cleveland for Miami. You're gonna have to deal with the burning of the jerseys because that's what it is, right? That's
Which
how
that's super
basketball fans
weird.
are.
Player leaves. I spent $80 or $150 on like a Nike Swingman official NBA jersey. I'm not burning that thing.
Yeah, I wouldn't burn a jersey. It's just too much money, you know.
I
But
only own 4 NBA jerseys, and 3 of them I've acquired within the last 2 years. Those things are expensive.
yeah, I don't actually have an official NBA jersey because I'm not willing to spend like $80 on it.
Or actually, sorry, I have 3 NBA jerseys, and then I have a Devin Booker college jersey, which it's
Right.
also official because I saw it on Facebook Marketplace in Thunder Bay for like $10, and I was like, yeah, I'll take that. So I have 3, and then I have a Book Kentucky Wildcats jersey. Or
Yeah.
Villanova. Where did Book go?
Kentucky. Like
Kentucky. I have a Book Kentucky jersey. But yeah,
I feel
like
like we
I'm
played
not.
with some really good players at Kentucky.
It would take a lot for me to like even throw out one, even to throw out one of these jerseys. It would take a lot, let alone to burn it.
Yeah, and yeah, I personally wouldn't burn a jersey. Seems crazy to me.
Yeah.
Um, same.
So Steph Curry goes down this week, out indefinitely. What are the Warriors' chances?
Winning a championship without Steph Curry, or chances of what?
Well, not of winning a championship without Steph Curry, but of winning a championship assuming Steph Curry comes back with 2 games left in the regular season on a minutes restriction and then jumps in for the playoffs, quote unquote, ready to roll.
Um, if Steph Curry is ready, I think Steph Curry's game is not based on athletic ability. Um,
Right.
so like Steph Curry with a slightly bum ankle should still be able to shoot the lights out.
Right.
Um,
But
so if Steph Curry comes back and Steph Curry says he's 100%, uh, I'm no further down on the Warriors than I would have been before.
right. I I can't decide. I think we underrate as fans. We underrate the value of chemistry. So you
Yeah,
see it like you, and I know there's tons of stats out there, but teams rarely win the first year the big three is put together or whatever it is.
right,
And the Warriors now are not the same Warriors that we saw from 2015 on, and
right.
not in a bad way. Like they have Jordan Poole who's having a great year, and Andrew Wiggins now, who's Andrew Wiggins was an All Star, whether or not he should have been, but
Mm.
Andrew Wiggins is an All Star now. We have to say that, and like Wiseman's coming back from injury. He might have already come back and played his first game yesterday, or he's coming back very, very shortly. So they have tons of talent, but like whether or not Wiseman, they're going to be able to incorporate him because last year in Wiseman's rookie season, he was basically unplayable by the time it
Right,
got through. And when the Warriors actually started to get good, it was because they stopped playing Wiseman and they just let Steph go off, right?
right. And I mean, I think we do undervalue chemistry, but I also think that there's something to be said for Steph Curry going down and Jordan Poole becoming more comfortable as a scorer. So
Yeah,
now Jordan Poole is a more viable option off the bench, or Andrew Wiggins is ready to score 30 if need be.
right.
So there's something to be said for role players who become more ready for their roles because star players go down.
Well,
Um,
and
sorry, and I just think that the chemistry between Steph, Clay, and Draymond isn't going to improve in the next 20 games. The chemistry between them and Wiggins and whoever they start at center on a given day, Looney, or if it ends up being Wiseman, would improve, sure, but that chemistry is always going to be there.
well, in now, so Jordan Poole, when Klay Thompson came back from injury, Jordan Poole was relegated to the bench, and his numbers went way down. But
Right,
now they've implemented Jordan Poole as a starter again, and his numbers are going back up.
right,
So, interestingly, they've started running Steph, Poole, Clay, Wiggins, and in theory Draymond if everybody's healthy.
right,
So while it's a really small lineup, there's no way to stop it.
right. And I mean, it's almost surprising that they can like Draymond is so good that he can be a non-shooter as not an elite scorer,
Right?
which you don't have very many places in the NBA where a 6'9" guy can just not shoot and not score and be totally invaluable to a team.
Draymond is. Would you say Draymond is a top 10 player in the league in terms of overall value, in terms of value per position per dollar? Does that make sense?
I don't think so, but he'd be at least close.
But like, would you rather like take a player like take some of the fringe top 10 players, right?
Right.
Like Kyrie Irving. I don't know who else. I'm trying to think of who my top 10 is now, so I'm going down a rabbit hole. But like, let's say Kyrie Irving. Like, obviously Dame's probably. Some people argue he's top 10. Some people argue he's top 8. Whatever, right?
Mhm.
Assuming, let's say you already have one other star player,
Yeah.
would you rather have Draymond? Like that's where I'm going with this, right? Is if you could have Steph and Dame on the same team, would you rather like seriously think about it and like the benefits on defense and the benefits to the rest of the guys on the floor with the distribution and everything? Would you rather have Draymond?
I would say no. I think in the NBA is such a heavy 3-point shooting league,
Right.
and it's such a scoring league now that if you have Steph and Dame, either one can hit a 35 footer at any given time.
Right.
Both are completely unguardable by anybody.
Right.
It's you can just outscore teams. And I know
So then,
Draymond is a great defender, but I feel like having a great defender is one step down from having a great offensive player.
yeah, but he is a great offensive player because he gets everybody on the floor involved. But then, here's my interesting question: is where would the tipping point be for you? So Steph's an easy example because they currently play together. But let's say it's like, and it could be anybody. So you have Steph on your team, but it could be Dame, could be Kyrie, whoever.
Right.
Would you rather have Steph and Bradley Beal or Steph and Draymond? Like, is Bradley Beal the tipping point? Where Dame is Dame, but then, like, Bradley Beal, you're like, well, the defensive benefits are really good with Draymond. Because if you look at the Warriors, as much as it's Steph and Clay, the Splash Bros, it's Steph and Draymond. And then Clay is the perfect piece to be the third piece for Steph and Draymond. But Steph and Draymond is really what makes the Warriors work.
Right. And I think I remember seeing a graphic of Steph's numbers with Draymond versus without Draymond. I'm not sure if it was a season or over the career. I know in the game, Steph Curry dropped 56, 57, something like that. And he played 35 plus minutes. And
Right.
41 of his points came in the 15 minutes he was on the
Yeah,
floor with Draymond.
I saw that. That was insane.
Because Draymond just is a good screener. He's a good passer. He just gets people open. And I don't, even as a basketball fan, I don't really understand how Draymond can impact a game this much.
Yeah, well, and apparently too, I've heard interviews like on the defensive end, he not only is such a great defender on ball and off ball, but like he's directing the other guys on defense.
Right.
Like he's coordinating like where everybody has to stand and like so and so has to take a step forward and like to really block the lane or whatever. Apparently, like he's literally the maestro of the whole thing on defense.
Right. And yeah, it just makes almost no sense to me how Draymond can average with whatever he's averaging 7, 7, and 7 and
Yeah.
be an elite NBA player.
Well, and that's what I mean, right? So that's how much Draymond is undervalued to me is when I'm like, so you're probably yeah, you're right. Like Stephen, if I could have Stephen and Dame, sure, but like when I get to Stephen Bradley Beal, then it starts to be a tipping point for me. Well, I'm like, well, Steph and Draymond are really good together. Or like imagine if you started running Dame around, like you run Steph Curry around, like off ball,
Mm.
put Dame with Draymond, or put Bradley Beal with Draymond. Like you know what I mean?
Right.
When I'm starting to piece these two things together, there are a lot of players that I would rather stick with Draymond than stick with another player.
Right.
Even though we
And
don't traditionally talk about Draymond being like a top 10, top 15 player in the league.
right. Because if you have an elite scorer and you put them with Draymond, they're going to become a more elite scorer.
Right.
Versus, so Draymond is a very good second star to have when your first star is a great shooter slash scorer.
Right.
Draymond, I feel like would be a bad second star to have if your top star was like Giannis. Well, Ben Simmons as well.
I didn't even
But,
think it'd be bad with Giannis because just by the defense would be so good, and then the distribution would still be there.
right, but with Giannis, it's like he's not a shooter, right? So you're
Yeah.
gonna have multiple non-shooters on the floor. And in today's NBA, I feel like you can only afford one non-shooter.
I think you can have two if it's the perfect scenario, like Giannis and Draymond. Like imagine Giannis and Draymond at the 4 and the 5. So you don't have
Right.
a traditional big out there, but you have the two of them who can both kind of do a little bit of everything really well, minus
Right.
the shooting. I think if you're in an elite scenario, then you could have two non-shooters, but I understand your general point.
Right. Yeah, I guess if they're both elite players, you can manage. But I mean, Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid might be the best non-shooting duo. Joel Embiid's a shooter. Forget that.
Yeah, I was gonna say Joel Embiid's like 38% from three.
Yeah. I don't think in the playoffs, at least, you can have multiple non-shooters on the floor.
Yeah, yeah, you're probably right about that because the defense in the playoffs changes so much. It's a different game when you get to the playoffs and everybody starts actually locking down fast break.
Right.
But speaking of that, I think if you are the Suns or the Warriors or the Grizzlies this year, you have to win this year because Jamal Murray and Jokic and Aaron Gordon and Michael Porter Jr. and the Nuggets are coming for you. And
You
then
think next year the Nuggets are going to be the prohibitive favorites to win the championship?
no, not necessarily, but like this year they're basically a non-factor if you're the Suns, right?
Yeah.
But then also the Lakers, in theory, might be coming for you. You never know, but this year, same thing. They're a non-factor. Like if you're the Suns, you might not even play the Lakers at all.
Right.
And then the Clippers are coming for you. Kawhi and Paul George are going to be back, like we talked about last week. If you have Kawhi, you have hope because you have Kawhi, and he's a monster. So if you're in the Western Conference and you're one of the three teams, being the Grizzlies, the Suns, or the Warriors, you have to win this year because it's not that, well, with the exception of the Grizzlies, in my opinion, but it's not that
Yeah.
the Warriors or the Suns can't win next year, but man, it's going to be a lot harder of a road.
Right. And I was going to say it's a little bit unreasonable to say the Grizzlies have to do it this year because your best player is 23, 24-year-old John Morant,
And John Morant, like 21.
22. I
I was
don't
gonna
know
say
how
John
old John
Morant's, like,
Morant
really
is
young, dude.
exactly. Um,
Give me a
so like John Morant is getting better. He's 22.
Oh, there you go.
So like John Morant's going to get better, and the Grizzlies are a young team all around. Jaren Jackson's going to get a little bit better, and Desmond Bane's going to get better. Um, I mean, the Warriors, like, I understand the Clippers with Kawhi and Paul George are coming, but if the Warriors come back fully healthy with Steph, Clay, and Draymond, still tough to beat.
The only
Um,
thing I see with the Grizzlies, like when I say the Grizzlies have to win right now, I don't mean like in terms of, yeah, obviously John Morant, they're going to have John Morant for the next 8 years, and John Morant's incredible. But I meant more from the aspect of I think they might run into a payment problem, which is where the Suns are at, where as much as you have all these 22, 23-year-old players, you're not
hmm,
necessarily going to be able to afford to pay them all at the same time. Because like that's where the
right,
Suns are at, where they have Bridges, and like Bridges is fringe defensive player of the year candidate, and he's like one of the best 3-and-D wings in the league, like Mikal Bridges. But then
yeah,
any team is willing to overpay Mikal Bridges. So the Suns already haven't paid Ayton because Ayton wants a max, and the Suns are not prepared to do that right now. And then they've got Book on the books, like, hey, see what I did there? They've got Book on the books, like, full time for the next however long Book wants to be paid by the Suns.
right,
Chris Paul is getting older, and he's been paid, and they're going to have to pay him again down the road. Like, they're just in that situation where everybody's starting, the contracts are starting to pile up, and other teams, especially the bad teams like Orlando and stuff, are willing to buy your bad players, especially wing players. So it'll be the same when the Grizz are going to have John Morant on the books at some point, like really expensively, and
mm,
Jaren Jackson Jr. And then now you're looking at Desmond Bain. Desmond Bain's going to be an expensive contract because he's a 3-and-D wing who is built like a football player. So they're going to be in that same situation where, honestly, if I look at the Grizzlies right now, I do feel like they could win 5 years down the road, 8 years down the road with John Morant when he's 29 years old, and who knows who they have around him. But this year, with a weak Western Conference and players like Bane and Jaren Jackson Jr., who are playing really, really well, and I think Zaire Williams is also playing really well, but who are playing really well, but also not being paid $21 million a year, this is a really good chance year for them.
right. Though the only team I really see falling off, like you mentioned, the Suns aren't going to be able to pay everybody, and Chris Paul's
Right.
getting older. So if you lose one of Ayton or Bridges and you can't pay Chris Paul, and all of a sudden the Western Conference is still getting better, and now you might be kind of gone, right?
Right.
Um, so the Suns may have the window close a lot quicker than they expected it to.
Right.
But yeah, I think the Grizzlies have a much longer term window than a team like the Suns or almost even the Warriors because John Morant's gonna be around a long time.
The Grizzlies.
Yes,
Last I checked, John Morant's not on the Warriors.
I said the Grizzlies might have a bigger window than the Warriors.
Oh, I thought
Yeah,
the Warriors have. Okay, sorry, I misinterpreted that. That's funny though.
uh,
Yeah, I don't know. The whole thing is tricky, but I think being one of the teams that I've talked about, knowing that the other three teams, like being the Nuggets, potential the Lakers, and the Clippers are coming for you, you have to you don't have to get it done this year, but it's such an easier road if you do.
Right.
Like, not to mention also that then if take it a step further, Brooklyn is hopefully potentially possibly coming next season with if they get everybody healthy and the vaccine mandate clears for Kyrie. And Philly's going to have more chemistry and they might retool Tobias Harris and get rid of him to free up cap room and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
Like the league, and it's the same as when the Raptors did it in 2019. The league is unstable. And unstable is a good time to win if you're one of the teams that's probably not a built dynasty that's going to win 3
Right.
rings in a row.
You're not if you're a team that doesn't necessarily have you're not stacked with superstars, you're just well built.
Right, exactly.
That's
And
the
that's what the
time that
Raptors did.
you take that and you win, right? I
No,
agree.
I completely agree. So then, another talking point, Brook Lopez has come back from injury, and he's on a minutes restriction. But I think that's big for the Bucks because
What?
now, so obviously Brook Lopez is a really good 3 and D center, so not quite like Mikal Bridges, but like you get the point.
Yeah.
And he's really good because then Giannis doesn't have to play all the bruising minutes at center, and they can just put Giannis at center lineups out in the final 5 minutes if they feel it's their best shot.
Right.
And Brook Lopez can still space the floor. But now they're in a tricky situation because they gave away all their wings because they got rid of DiVincenzo.
Mm-hmm.
And then they've had a couple wings get hurt. So now they're in this weird situation where they got Ibaka because they weren't sure if Lopez was going to come back. But now Lopez is back, and they have Lopez and Ibaka and Giannis.
Right.
And they never really replaced PJ Tucker in terms of like a stretch 4 who's really good defensively. And then they don't really have any wings because they got rid of DiVincenzo, who was not having a good year. He's back from injury, all that kind of stuff. So the Bucks are in this weird situation now where they kind of have their championship roster back together, and obviously they still have their big 1, really good 2, and then some strong role players. But I don't know if that's enough for the Bucks to really go anywhere this year.
Yeah, and it's interesting. The Eastern Conference is really tough right now. With the Bucks and the 76ers and the Nets as a playing team. And I don't really know about how good the Celtics are going to be come playoff time or how good the Bulls are going to be come playoff time or even the Cavs or the Raptors. So it's not an easy path to get through the Eastern Conference.
Right.
I think the Bucks are still the favorites to get through, but I would pick the field over the Bucks. But if I had to pick one team, I would probably pick the Bucks.
You pick the Bucks out of the whole Eastern Conference?
If I was going to pick
if you
one
had
team,
to pick one team.
yeah, I would pick the Bucks to get to the finals.
I think I picked the Heat.
That's
That takes a
interesting.
lot for me to say because I love Giannis, but I just think the Heat, player for player, are better. And then, assuming they're healthy, which they've not been this year, but Jimmy Butler levels up in the playoffs and just turns into like this monster of a player. So
Right.
Kyle Lowry plays winning basketball. He plays winning basketball in the playoffs. They have Duncan, which Duncan's actually not having a great shooting year, but you never know. You know, all he has to do is start hitting some threes, and then they're really off to the races. And Bam's really good at center. So if I
Right.
depend on, like I said, I would also pick the field just based on the fact that the East is so uncomfortable right now. But if I had to pick a team, I'd pick the Heat.
And I see that. And I see that the addition of Kyle Lowry to that team should be big for playoff time.
Right.
And that's going to be a horrifying defense to have to play with Kyle Lowry and Jimmy Butler and Bam and
PJ
all the
Tucker.
defenders, PJ Tucker and Duncan Robinson. Um, anyway, yeah. So I can see why you would pick the Heat. I don't think the Heat necessarily have enough scoring.
Right.
I think the Heat do a lot of their scoring in transition and
Which will
don't
be
have a
harder in the
ton
playoffs.
of and don't have a ton of half court options. But I mean, they have a couple guys where you can say, "Hey, go get me a basket," and they can go get you a basket. So that can become your half court scoring in the playoffs.
Yeah. Well, and Hero's really good for that off the bench. And then, like I said, we'll need to see bubble Jimmy Butler again for the Heat to really have a chance. So obviously, if we don't get that excellent Jimmy Butler, then yeah, the Heat are a no-go. But if we do, which I don't see why we wouldn't, I guess, then I think the Heat are a really, really solid bet, even though I'd still pick the field because the Eastern Conference is just such a toss-up right now. On a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you think the Lakers regret not trading Taylor Horton Tucker for Kyle Lowry?
Uh, 11 ish, somewhere
11.
between 11 and 18.
Yeah. Can you imagine? They could have just had Kyle Lowry, Anthony Davis, and LeBron, but they went, no, we really want Taylor Horton Tucker. And we went, we really want Taylor Horton Tucker. And then they were like, we can't make it work.
Yeah, unbelievable that they wouldn't be willing to trade Taylor Horton Tucker. Like he's an untouchable player. I don't understand.
That's a whoopsie. Oh, no. We made an error. So then I know you want to touch on the Bulls as well.
Yeah, the Bulls have a serious chance to go from 1 seed to play-in team, which is crazy. They were the 1 seed for I feel like the majority of the first half,
Right.
and now they are 2 games up on the Raptors,
Right.
and they have 1 game left against the Raptors. So there's a decent and a much harder schedule. So there's a decent chance if the Raptors take that one Bulls game, that Chicago could fall down to the 7 seed and now be in a play-in against Brooklyn once they were the 1 seed.
That's crazy. Well, to be fair, the only thing we questioned with them was their ability to defend, and then their two potentially all NBA defensive guards both went down. So
Right.
I would still bet on them in a playoff matchup, like not over the Heat or something, but like in a first round playoff matchup if they got like the Well, I don't want to bet against the Raptors, but you know what I mean. Like I still think they're a great team, but they need Lonzo and Caruso.
Yeah, I think they absolutely need Lonzo and Caruso. They're the team I would be least intimidated to play in the playoffs of anybody in the top 8 in the Eastern Conference.
Including the Raptors?
I mean, as the Raptors, me being the
Oh,
Raptors.
okay. I thought you meant just in general. Like you is
Be-
you and me. Like you and me is Port Perry High School.
Me being the Raptors, I would rather play the Bulls than the Cavs or the Celtics or anybody like that.
Right. I'm looking to see now if Patrick Williams is going to come back this year. Yeah, Patrick Williams is going to come back too. So they'll have him to defend in the starting lineup at power forward.
Right.
So they'll have Lonzo, Levine, DeRozan, probably Patrick Williams, and then Vooch.
Yeah, and that's a great lineup.
And then Caruso off the bench like the Lakers did.
Yeah, the Lakers were willing to part with Caruso and not pay him, but couldn't part with Taylor Horton Tucker.
Yeah. That's just they're in a bad sequence of events, and they got Russell Westbrook, who they are paying like $40-something million a year.
Yeah,
that was a bad sequence of events. But the Bulls are on a slide. I'm prepared to bet that they'll continue to slide until everybody comes back and they get a few games under their belt in terms of the chemistry again. But
right.
I'm even as like a 7 seed. I think that'd be terrifying if you're one of the upper teams. Like I don't think you don't want the Bulls to fall any lower than they are if you're like the 1 or 2 seed.
Yeah, I agreed. You'd really like to have the Bulls in a second round series if you're the Heat, I think. So
yeah, exactly. So then, last but not least, I know you have something to hit us with on the closeout here.
This is just an interesting stat, I guess, I found on the Hornets. The Hornets are 35-35.
Okay.
They're 17-17 at home, 18-18 on the road, 22-22 versus the Eastern Conference, and 13-13 versus the Western Conference.
The Hornets are 500.
Perfectly balanced as all things should be, as Thanos once said.
Well, and it's funny because they're 500 because they score 150 points in a game, and then the next game they give up 150 points, and they just swing back and forth because they're phenomenal offensively. They can't defend at all.
Yeah, and that's the thing about that's why I have no interest in playing the Hornets in a playing game, because are they going to hit the game that they score 163 points? I don't want to see that.
The Hornets specifically, I see the other way. I'd be willing to play them in a play-in game because I bet that they give up 150 points in the first quarter.
Right.
Like, I bet you could put up 60 on them in the first quarter and the game's already over.
Yeah, and I can see that too. It's just you don't want to run into the hot Hornets team because then they're really tough to beat. So
yeah, no, that's fair.
Interesting.
Not speaking of the Hornets because it doesn't really relate at all, but it popped into my head. The Hawks and the Knicks. What a fall.
Speaking of the Hornets, let's talk about 2 entirely different teams.
Well, I thought of LaMelo, and then I thought, Trae Young plays basketball, and then here we are. So, and we won't go over
the
this for a long time, but the
yeah
Hawks and the Knicks.
the Knicks are horrible, 10 games under 500, 30-40, which is actually the same record the Lakers have. Fun
Yeah, I
fact.
was gonna say we talk about it as if the Lakers aren't also the same.
The Hawks are 500, and I think they've had some injuries. And yeah, the Hawks after that playoff series, like I didn't ever really think the Knicks were good, but I thought the Hawks were kind of here to stay. Not here
Right.
to stay as an elite team, but here to stay as a playoff team.
Yeah, I completely agree. I didn't think the Knicks were ever particularly good, and I thought the Hawks were pretty decent.
Julius Randle had a great season, and I was ever like, Julius Randle's a superstar now. I was like, how is Julius Randle doing that? It's Julius Randle.
Well, and to be fair, it sucks to be Julius Randle because you had a career year, and like a lot of guys don't have an NBA season that was as good as his NBA season, right?
But
But everybody's like, oh, like the Knicks are really bad now, and it's all Julius Randle's fault. Which, to be fair, it is. But nevertheless, that really sucks because like he had a career year, and he's just not destined to be the best player on a playoff team, right?
yeah, it's just not who Julius Randle is, and I haven't watched enough of him to know what really he is. Like, can he be the second option? Probably not.
No,
Is he a great third option? Is he
Well,
a
he's a
mediocre
third
third
option if you
option?
put like he could play if you put him with Stephen Clay, he'd be a good third option for them.
Right.
Or you put him with like Damon, CJ, and Julius Randle.
Yeah, but yeah, the Knicks are awful, and the Knicks will probably always be awful. So
I'm watching for the Pelicans. Wait and see if Zion, like not this season, but in general, like the Pelicans in the coming years. That's who I have my eye on. If Zion ever plays again.
Zion, CJ, Brandon Ingram, Valanciunas, and Bledsoe. Who's their starting
Devontae
point guard?
Graham.
Devontae Graham. That's
Yeah,
a heck of a lineup though.
that's a
When
heck
you're
of a
running
lineup.
out, when you can run out CJ, Ingram, Zion, and JV.
Well, and Zion can play the 4, the 5, and the 1.
I feel like JV is one of the most underrated centers in the league.
I think he's rated right where he should be. He's really good offensively, not that great defensively. He gets boards though.
He's 18 and 11 on 54% from the field. And I think he's got a good 3-point percentage, but I don't know for sure.
To quote Matt Devlin, death taxes and JV's threes.
That taxes and JV series.
The only things that are certain in life. Oh, I miss those Raptors. I would go back and maybe I should go back and watch some of the 2016 Raptors games. What a great team.
Also, what last thing I want to say, one of the other most underrated centers in the league is apparently Jakob Poeltl, another former Raptor. So
Yeah, he's having a great year.
ex-Raptor centers all over the place.
Yeah, which is weird because oddly enough, we don't really have a center.
No, we
Weird
have
how
a
things
lot of
work.
power forwards.
Yeah, there you go. So maybe we need to hold on to our center. Let's hold on to Precious, see what happens there.
Yeah, agreed.
So that's all we've got for the In the Clutch podcast this week. We'd like to thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.